Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. My name's Nader. This is going to be a problem set video as a companion to the Boolean operators in JavaScript video. We're going to go through a bunch of exercises together, some a bit easier and then some moderate and some quite challenging for how Boolean operators work in JavaScript. Let's get right into it. Okay, so with these videos, we're going to have a problem set stated in comments at the top of each of these files. You can see that I've created 4 files for this video. I'm going to go through it step by step and just explain what we're going to need to do. Then I encourage you to pause the video, try it yourself before we go through the solution together. So for this warm up, just to get our fingers warmed up, I've asked to write out the truth tables for these 3 Boolean operators. So just as a reminder, the truth tables look like this. So for and, it looks like this. For or, it looks like this. And for not, it looks like this. And the way that we're going to do this is using console log. So there's 4 possibilities for and, 4 for or, and 2 for not. And you can kind of do it just like this. Just give you a minute to try that out yourself. Then we'll get through it together. Okay, so I'm just going to put a couple of logs here just to make it easier for us to see in the console. So this will be the ands first. You didn't have to do this. This is mainly just for the video, but I encourage you to try it just to get practice separating things out while you're logging as well. So for the and case, we have 4 possibilities. We have true and true. And then we have 3 others. So we have true and false. We have false and true. And then we have false and false. So let's just take a look at what this looks like. I'm going to pull up my console, my terminal here. I'm going to make sure I'm in the correct directory. I'm going to run node and then problem set. In this case, I named it warmup. And you can see that I get true, false, false, false for these and operations. And this lines up with this table right here where we can see where we have true, false, false, false with these different input values. All right. So I'm going to do the same thing, but for or, I'll just kind of copy this just to make it a bit easier here to save us some time. And all of these are going to be switched to the or operator, just like that, the double pipe operator. I'm going to clear this out just so we have a bit more space and run it again. And you can see that for or, we have true, 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 and then false, using the same order of operations. So that you can see if we go to the or truth table, we have true, 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 false with the same input parameters. Okay, and finally we have not, which is a little bit shorter. So I'll just kind of copy this one right here, just save some time, do not. And the not operator only works with one Boolean value. So in this case, it's in a bang right at the front, and it can only be not true, or it can be not false. And this will just flip the value. So this should be false and this should be true. And if I run this, we should see that I indeed get false and then true. All right, perfect. Let's go to the next problem set. I'll just close this off. So for this next one, I want you to try to think of the answers to these before you actually code them out and console log them out and see what you get. These are a bit tricky, so anticipate getting them wrong the first time or two that you try them out, but we'll go through them together, and eventually the more practice you get, the better you'll get. So for the first one, is the string 1 equal to, strict equal to, this is 3 equal signs, is the string 1 strict equal to the number 1? And then is 3 greater than 2 strict equal to true? Is 2 to the power of 2 not strict equal to the string 4? And then the result of this operation here, which on the left side is true strict equals true, and then the and operator false strict equals false. Okay, quite tricky. Take your time with this one. Once you give it a shot, let's go through it together. So for this first one, 1 as a string, strict equals to, so this is 3 equal signs. So just my editor does the ligatures and it kind of puts them together just to save some space. 1 strict equals to the number 1. All right, so this is tricky, right? Because 1 as a number 1, strict equals to 1, we would anticipate this to be true. But what about a string strict equals to 1? So let's see what the result of this is. If I clear this out and I run node and then problem set 1, we get false, right? So this is the difference between the strict equal sign and the not strict equal sign. So just for sake of example, I'm just going to get rid of one equals and make this a double equals and run this again, and you'll see that I get true. Okay. This is very strange behavior. What's happening is this is either turning this into a number or turning this into a string. It's always kind of hard to tell which one does what, but it's a bit looser when it's double equals. That's why I mentioned always use strict equals, because we're comparing the type as well as the actual value. So we want this to be false in this case. So if we do this next one together, is 3, so I'm going to put this in brackets, 3 greater than 2 equal to true. My editor actually gets rid of the brackets when I save this file, but for best practice, you should actually put the brackets in most cases. If the editor notices a lot of time that it's not really necessary, sometimes they'll remove it just for sake of concise code. But is 3 greater than 2 strict equal to true? So let's look at this as a left-hand side and as a right-hand side. On the left-hand side, we have 3 greater than 2. So if we look at that statement in isolation and we isolate it, and we ask the question, is 3 greater than 2? This is true. This will give us true, right? And then if we look at the right-hand side, we also have true. So this actually turns into this statement, which is true strict equals to true, which is true. Okay, a lot of true going on. So if I run this, you'll see that this second statement actually is true. All right, cool. Just clear this out to give us some space. The next one is 2 to the power of 2 is not strict equal to the string 4. Okay, so we're going to do 2 to the power of 2 is not equal to the string 4, not the number 4. Okay. So let's again do left-hand side and right-hand side with this. 2 to the power of 2, that is 4, right? So we're going to have the number 4 on the left. And we're asking, is the number 4 not strict equal to the string 4? So it is not equal to the string 4, right? That's true. It's not equal. Notice this is not equal. So we would expect this to be true because they're not equal to each other. If we made this as equal instead of not equal, then it would be false. All right. Takes a little bit of a mind bend to get that going. I think I even almost mixed that up really quick, just thinking through it as well. I'm gonna leave this as not equals to make sure that we match our question. Okay. Finally, the last one is the result of this statement. True equals true, ampersand, so and false equals false. So I'm going to console.log that out. Is a true equals true, ampersand, false equals false. Okay. So give it a think as to what this might be. But again, usually what you want to do is evaluate the left-hand side and then the right-hand side. So the left-hand side, let's take a look at this. Is true equal to true strictly? Yes, it is. So we're going to then go to the right-hand side. And we're going to ask, is false strict equal to false? And that is true. This will give us true. So we're actually going to end up with true, ampersand, true in this case. And this is going to give us back true, which is this second value here. So if we run this again, you're going to see that we do get true for that one. This is quite a tricky exercise. Definitely takes some kind of getting used to. Play around with the values. Kind of rewatch this a few times. But if you didn't get these all right away, don't worry. This is meant to be challenging. Okay. Problem set number 2 here. So for this one, we want to see what each of these variables is actually going to evaluate to. So we're going to have 4 variables here, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we're going to be pointing them at different values depending on what the right-hand sides are being initialized to or evaluating to. So for this first one, we're evaluating true and or ampersand, and then the string hi, false, ampersand by, and then we have true or meow, and then false or rar. So again, this is quite challenging to kind of get through how this works. These will probably also be a bit challenging if it's the first time you're seeing the ors. But in fact, this whole exercise is a little bit more challenging. So give it a whirl, and then we'll look at this together. And just before you do that as well, what you want to probably really think is, what is this going to evaluate to? Like, what is 1 going to be when we actually evaluate this statement and point 1 at that result? What is 2 going to be when we evaluate this statement and point 2 at that result on the right hand side? Okay, so give that a shot. And once you've done that, we'll look at it together. So we're going to say const 1 is equal to true and the string hi. Then we're going to console.log out 1. Okay, I'm going to do node and then problem set. This is 2. And we get hi because when we're doing it like this as an assignment in this case, we're going to check true, which is true. And with and, we have to check the second one if the first one is true. And whatever this ends up being, we end up sticking that inside this variable. Okay, or more correctly, pointing this variable at that value. So let's do another one here. Const 2 is equal to false ampersand by, and then we're going to console.log out 2. So for this one, since the left hand side is false, we don't even have to check the right hand side. So we're actually going to take this value, which is false, and put it inside 2, or point 2 at that false value, and we're going to print that out. So we should see false, and we do for that one. So for these last two, similar things, but using the or operator. So we'll say const 3 equals true or the string meow. We're going to console log out 3. So or is a little bit different than the and case. We just short circuit basically if we see a true, because we don't have to check the right hand side if the first left hand side is true. So in this case, since the left hand side is true and we're asking or, we don't actually have to evaluate and check meow. So we would just get true for 3. Okay, great. And then for the final one, const 4, this is false this time with or. We'll do rar and we'll console log out 4. And if I make some space here again, this is going to give us the right hand side, which is rar, right? Because with or, we check this one, it's false. We still have a chance to check the right hand side, unlike the and case. And in this case, we're just going to return the right hand value no matter what, pretty much. So 4 will always, in this case, if it's false or something, will be the second right hand side. So again, this was quite tricky, so if you don't get this right away, try it a few times. Don't beat yourself up over it. We're going to see this occasionally as we get into more advanced and complex programs, and we'll get more and more practice with this, but this is just an introduction to this subject for Boolean operators. Most of the time, what you're going to see is things used in this way. So as long as you kind of understand the evaluation of these true, and then this is false, false, false for and likely for or and not, that will get you really far, especially once we get started with conditional statements. Okay. So the third problem set here is very similar to the one that we just looked at, although with some added funkiness in here. This is going to be used a lot when we look at technologies such as React or even other things in more advanced JavaScript in the future. And really think about what is happening here. This is a very, very challenging problem set. So if you really want a challenge, take a look at this. If you're not interested in this for now, definitely skip it and come back to it later when you actually need to learn this stuff. But for those of you that want the challenge, let's go through this one together. So we want to look at what each of these lines of code does. Okay. So they're either, in this case, going to do actually nothing, or they're going to log something to the screen. That's effectively what we want to check. Okay. And we want to look at why this happens as well once we actually do this. So give it a think and then actually code it out and see what you get and see if that matches what your thought process was. And then we'll go through this together. Okay. So for this first one, oops, but so used to putting console log. I'm actually just going to copy this one here. So I'm going to say true and console log moo. So this looks kind of weird, right? Because we're not assigning anything. We're not making a variable. We're not assigning a variable to anything. This is just like a statement in JavaScript, okay? This might not seem useful. However, there are many cases where this is used as we start learning further technologies in web development and in JavaScript in general. So looking at this statement, we look at true. And we know that in an AND case, if the first left-hand side is true, we're going to want to look at the right-hand side, which is, in this case, console log moo. And most critically, what ends up happening is the right-hand side actually gets evaluated. So it actually runs, quote unquote. In this case, this console log is actually going to run, and we will see moo logged to the screen. Okay, so let me prove that. So if I run node and then problem set 3, we see moo logged to the screen, right? Which is coming from this right-hand side. Because we're evaluating this, getting back true, we have to check the right-hand side, we're evaluating this, and then that actually runs this console log, which is why we see this logged to the screen. Okay. Interestingly, if you console log this entire thing out in a console log, you will get what's returned by this, but we won't look at that until we get to functions, so don't worry about that too much right now. So for the second one, which is false, and console.log, and then I said moo. So this one is interesting because we're starting with false for the AND case. And we know that for AND, if the first thing is false, we don't even bother looking at the right-hand side. Okay, so we're actually not going to see moo printed out in this case. It's always fun to say. Okay, so I'm going to run this, and we still get just the moo. So we do not get this second console log evaluated and run. Okay. So for the OR cases, I'll just copy this again to save a bit of time. For OR, it's also quite funky and it takes a little while to get used to. So for this case, we have true on the left-hand side. And we know that for OR, if we have true on the left, we don't even bother looking at the right because it's already true. The whole thing is true. So it's just a waste of effort kind of for JavaScript to look at this because this statement is already true. So it's going to take this value and kind of evaluate it, which is just going to give us true. And since it's not logging anything, it's just going to kind of throw that value away and we're not going to see anything logged to the screen. So if I run this now, you see that we still only get moo. We don't get the hello friend. Okay. However, if I copy this one here, which is pretty much the same thing except with false first and the OR operator, now false means that we have to look at the right-hand side because the right-hand side might be true. So we jump kind of over this fence and we look at console.log, we run that code, we evaluate it, and the byproduct of that is logging out by friend. And then we kind of throw away the value in this case, which is undefined. So if I run this, you see that I do get by friend for this final OR case. Okay, so play around with that. It definitely takes some practice. It might not seem immediately obvious why this is used. However, as we get into frameworks and more advanced JavaScript, really you will see how this shortens a lot of code. We can get away without writing code that looks as concise and funky as this. However, once you get used to it, contextually it makes much more sense. It makes for much more clean and concise and easy to read code, especially in things like React once we get to that. Okay, I've also added a bonus for this video, which I'm excited to show all of you. This is like extra advanced. So if you really want to take a stab at it and you got the previous 1 or 2 exercises, I encourage you to take a look at this. If you've kind of had enough of this complexity, definitely revisit this in the future. So this one is looking at the logical assignment operators that are built into JavaScript. These are relatively new, especially this fancy funky one over here, which is the nullish coalescing assignment operator, the question mark equals. This is actually looks much more complicated, but it's very similar to this one, problem set 3. All right. It's just in this case, we're shortening it, very similar to plus equals and divide equals and minus equals, by using this shorthand. Okay, so I'll show you what that looks like. So look up what this looks like on Google. And then once you've done that, take a look at these statements. So we want to start username off as an empty string. And then we want to and equal assign it back to itself with the string tiger. So the question is, what is username going to be after we execute these two statements and try to log out username? Okay, so same thing for this VIP in this case, starting at 0, and then or equaling 3, and then logged in equaling null, and then question mark equaling 0. Okay, so we want to log out these 3 values, give that a shot. Definitely anticipate getting them wrong. This is definitely quite complicated. Even me just looking at this, I probably would have to think about it for a little while, so really don't worry if you get it wrong the first several times. You'll have to keep coming back to this to give it a shot. Okay, so for this first one, we're going to say let username equal to an empty string. Then we're going to say username ampersand equals tiger. And then we're going to console.log username. Okay. So this line is kind of the key line. This is the same thing as saying username is equal to username ampersand string tiger. Okay, which is actually the same thing as, I don't know where to write this, below or above. This is actually the same thing as saying empty string and tiger. And then username equals that, right? Because username is empty string. Okay, so now if you look at that statement, we know that the trick here is in JavaScript, an empty string is falsy, right? So we would take that value and immediately assign username to it. We wouldn't even bother looking at tiger. All right, so if I run node problem set bonus in this case, you can see that it looks like nothing happens, but I actually have an empty string being printed out right here, which is for username. Okay, I have an extra space, which is just how it gets printed out as in the terminal for an empty string in JavaScript. Okay, so username is actually equal to an empty string after this statement right here on line 23 for me. Let's look at the others. So we're going to say let VIP equals 0, and then we're going to say VIP or equals 3. And this is the same thing as saying VIP is equal to VIP or 3. Okay, and I'll try to put this on one line here, which is the same thing as saying VIP is equal to 0 or 3. Okay, so again, think about what a falsy value is and what this might evaluate to. And then we're going to console log VIP. So in this case, we know that 0, very similar to an empty string, is a falsy value. So just to kind of recall this, these are the falsy values in JavaScript. These are considered false, right? Because of how JavaScript is kind of funky in that way. So 0 and empty string are also false. So in this case, this left-hand side is false. And we know that with or, we have to then check the right-hand side, and we're going to evaluate that and point VIP at that value. So it's going to actually evaluate to 3, because we're going to jump over it, and we're going to get 3, and we're going to point VIP at the number 3. Right? So we see if I run this code, we get the number 3, and then the blank line above again is from the username that we had previously. Okay? Just realize that this is number 3, not number 4. I should probably edit that. And then finally, number 3, we're going to say let logged in equal to null. Okay, and then we're going to say logged in nullish coalescing equals 0. Okay, and then we're going to console.log logged in. So this one here, let's scroll down a bit just for some more space, is equal to, I'll just copy this. Logged in is equal to logged in nullish coalescing 0, which is the same thing as logged in is equal to null, nullish coalescing 0. Okay, and the difference with this is that with the nullish coalescing operator, we look at, like in this case, falsy values are null, undefined, and false. So 0 would not be considered falsy, and empty string would not be considered falsy with this special new operator in JavaScript, right? However, null is considered falsy. So in this case, where the left-hand side is null, that is false, which means that we have a chance to jump over this and evaluate the right-hand side, because this works kind of like an OR, except it restricts the left-hand side's falsy values to not include the traditional falsy values like 0 and empty string. So we get a chance to evaluate 0, which even though it is falsy, quote unquote, we still point logged in at that value because we get whatever's in the right-hand side put into logged in. So we'll actually get 0 for this. Okay, so if I save that and then run this file, you'll see that I get empty string 3 and then 0, with 0 being the one for logged in. Okay, so extra tricky, definitely really tricky. Takes a lot of practice. Even as I was putting this together, I actually was like, oh wait a minute, that's actually wrong. I actually messed that up. So don't worry if you get kind of tripped up by this. What ends up happening is you will really sit down and think about it as you use these operators, and you get more and more used to it. This one is used quite a lot, again, in things like web development and React and server-side development and things like that, and it becomes very useful once you know how to use it correctly, but it really takes that kind of muscle memory and practice. So I just wanted to bring that up here and give you some extra practice with these problem sets. This will really kind of give us a boost when we start looking at conditional statements. So that said, I hope you really enjoyed this problem set video. If you did enjoy it, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. In the next video, we're going to kind of take these concepts and look at conditional statements, which actually uses conditional or Boolean values, I should say, and allows us to control the flow of our code. So we can actually do one thing in one case with our code running and another thing in another case. So our code can become kind of less linear, and it kind of can branch off into different areas depending on what is happening in the program. So really excited to go through that together. I'll see you in that video.